Welcome to HFY Galaxy Tales. Like this video and subscribe the channel for more HFY stories. The thing about humans, I learned far too late, is that they possess an almost supernatural ability to ignore direct orders. Not out of malice, mind you. Not even out of stupidity, though I had my doubts at first. No, they ignore orders because somewhere in their bizarre evolutionary history, somebody decided that being told, absolutely do not do this thing, was actually a detailed instruction manual on exactly how to do that thing. My name is Voreth. I serve as a diplomatic observer for the Galactic Concordance, which is essentially a fancy way of saying I watch species destroy themselves and file reports about it afterward. 37 cycles I have been doing this job. 37 cycles without a single breach of protocol. Then I met Marcus Webb. Let me set the scene for you, because context matters here. The planet was Epsilon Tertius, a contested border world that 3 different species claimed as ancestral homeland. The Kryn, insectoid warriors with mandibles that could slice through titanium. The Vorlax, amphibious traders who considered economic warfare an art form. And the Salthene, crystalline beings who communicated through light pulses and had tempers shorter than a neutrino's lifespan. All 3 species hated each other with the burning intensity of 1,000 suns. Peace talks had failed 16 times. The Concordance had stationed observers on planet strictly to document what we all knew was coming, total annihilation. We were not, under any circumstances, permitted to interfere. I had explained this to Marcus approximately 47 times during his first week on the observation station. He was the human representative, sent by Earth's fledgling government to gain diplomatic experience. He was 28 standard years old, had a crooked smile that somehow made him look both trustworthy and guilty simultaneously, and possessed exactly zero regard for rules he deemed counterproductive. So let me get this straight, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair with his feet on the console, which was definitely against Regulation 17-4. We just watched them kill each other. Correct, I replied, trying to keep the exasperation out of my vocal harmonics. And we file reports. Affirmative. Reports that nobody reads. I paused. They are read eventually. By who? Archival algorithms, mostly. Marcus laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Humans have this way of laughing that can mean 17 different things, and I had not yet mastered the distinctions. This particular laugh seemed to indicate that he thought the entire universe was playing an elaborate joke on him. That is absurd, he said. That is protocol, I countered. Protocol is absurd. We had this conversation, or variations of it, every single day. The crisis point came during the 5th week. The Kryn had deployed military forces near the northern continent. The Vorlax had responded by crashing the planet's shipping markets. The Salthene had begun pulsing threatening light patterns that roughly translated to, "We will turn your genetic material into radioactive vapor." Standard apocalypse procedure, really. Marcus and I were monitoring communications when the first strike happened. A Kryn warship fired on a Vorlax trading post. Casualties, 412. The retaliation was immediate. Vorlax economic sanctions that would starve 3 Kryn hive colonies within a month. The Salthene, never ones to be left out of a good genocide, began charging their planetary defense grid. We need to do something, Marcus said quietly. We are doing something, I replied. We are observing and documenting. People are dying, Voreth. People die. It is the nature of conflicted species. Our interference would violate 17 separate concordance regulations and likely result in our immediate execution. Marcus stood up. He had this look in his eyes that I would later come to recognize as profoundly dangerous. Not angry. Not scared. Just, determined. What if we do not interfere, he asked. Then we continue observing, as mandated. No, I mean, what if we technically do not interfere? What if we just redefine the situation? I felt my sensory organs tighten with concern. Explain. The concordance says we cannot interfere in the conflict, correct? Correct. But it does not say we cannot participate in local cultural activities, does it? I accessed the regulation database. He was technically correct. Observer protocols included provisions for limited cultural engagement to maintain cover and gather intelligence. Cultural participation is permitted within strict boundaries, I admitted. However. Great. So we are just going to engage in some cultural participation. Marcus, whatever you are planning. Trust me, Borith. I am not going to interfere with anything. I am simply going to introduce these fine species to a beloved human tradition. He would not elaborate further. For 3 days, he worked on his personal terminal, occasionally laughing to himself in a way that made my threat assessment instincts scream warnings I could not quantify. On the 4th day, he announced he was ready. Ready for what? I demanded. For the first annual Epsilon Tertius Multi-Species Athletic Competition and Cultural Festival, he said with that crooked smile. I have already sent invitations to all 3 governments. My sensory organs went completely numb. You did what? Relax, Borith. It is just sports. Games. Friendly competition. Nothing that violates observer protocols. I checked. They will never agree to this. They are on the brink of total war. Which is exactly why they will agree, Marcus said. Think about it. The Kryn are warriors. They pride themselves on physical superiority. The Vorlax are competitive traders. They cannot resist a challenge. And the Salthine have ego structures that require them to prove dominance in any arena. None of them can back down from a direct challenge without losing face. It was insane. It was reckless. It was absolutely going to get us both executed. The Kryn accepted within 2 hours. The Vorlax accepted 30 minutes after that, probably to avoid appearing weak. The Salthine took 4 hours, but eventually their light pulses came back with grudging agreement. I cannot believe that worked, I whispered. Phase 1 complete, Marcus said cheerfully. Now comes the fun part. The fun part involved Marcus essentially inventing an entire multi-day sports festival from scratch. He called it the Unity Games, which I told him was an absurdly optimistic name. He ignored me. The competitions were deliberately chosen. Obstacle courses that required cooperation. Strategy games that rewarded planning over violence. Relay races with mixed species teams. Even cooking competitions, which seemed utterly bizarre until Marcus explained that food was a universal language. You cannot possibly believe this will work, I said as we watched him set up the first event arena. Of course not, Marcus replied. But it does not need to work permanently. It just needs to work long enough. Long enough for what? For them to realize they have more in common than they think. I wanted to tell him he was naive. I wanted to explain that species differences run deep, that hatred spanning generations cannot be undone with games and competitions. I wanted to remind him that we were observers, not miracle workers. But I did not say any of that. Instead, I helped him set up the arena. The first day of the games was absolute bedlam. The Kryn arrived in full battle armor, treating the obstacle course like a military operation. The Vorlax showed up with economic analysts, apparently convinced they could somehow monetize athletic performance. The Salthine pulsed aggressively at everyone, their light patterns barely contained hostility. The first event was a simple relay race. 3-person teams. Each team had to include 1 member from each species. The Kryn runner was a soldier named Thrak, all chitinous armor and clicking mandibles. The Vorlax was a merchant called Quilvan, whose skin constantly shifted through anxiety colors. The Salthine was a diplomatic aide whose name translated roughly to bright anger, which seemed appropriate. They did not want to work together. Thrak kept trying to dominate strategy. Quilvan kept suggesting they bet on the outcome instead of participating. Bright anger kept pulsing insults at both of them. Marcus watched with his arms crossed, that slight smile on his face. "This is a disaster," I muttered. "Give it time," he replied. The race began. Immediately, Thrak sprinted ahead, leaving the others behind. He completed his leg of the relay in record time, then turned to see his teammates struggling. Quilvan's amphibious legs were not designed for the terrain. Bright anger's crystalline structure made the obstacles nearly impossible. For a long moment, Thrak just stood there, mandibles clicking in what I recognized as frustration. Then he went back. He helped Quilvan navigate the water obstacle, using his armored body as a stepping platform. When Bright Anger got stuck in a narrow passage, Thrak actually adjusted the course elements to create a path the crystalline being could manage. They did not win the race. They came in dead last, actually. But when they crossed the finish line together, something had changed. Quilvan's skin had shifted to a calm blue. Bright Anger's light pulses had softened to something almost friendly. Thrak's mandibles were still clicking, but now it sounded almost like laughter. "Phase 2 complete," Marcus whispered. Over the next 6 days, I watched something impossible happen. The warriors learned that Vorlax merchants had complex family structures worth protecting. The Vorlax discovered that Kryn military discipline came from deep cultural honor codes. The Salthine realized that both other species appreciated beauty, just expressed differently. It was not friendship. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something. By the final day, mixed species teams were forming voluntarily. Competitions became collaborative instead of combative. I even witnessed a Kryn soldier sharing battle rations with a Vorlax trader while a Salthine pulsed what I was 90% certain was a joke. The planetary defense grids powered down. The warships withdrew. The economic sanctions were quietly lifted. Nobody declared peace. Nobody signed treaties. But the shooting stopped. "You interfered," I said to Marcus that night, watching the celebration below. "No," he replied with that crooked smile. "I just redefined the situation. The Concordance will review our actions. They will see what you did. Let them see. We followed every protocol. We engaged in cultural activities. We documented everything. We did not fire a single weapon or negotiate a single treaty term. We just played some games. I should have reported him immediately. I should have flagged the entire operation as a protocol violation. Instead, I filed a report titled, "Successful Observer Mission, Cultural Exchange Initiative Results in Spontaneous Conflict De-Escalation." Technically accurate. Completely misleading. Absolutely what Marcus would have done. "You know they are going to send us somewhere worse next time," I said. Marcus laughed. That particular laugh that meant he knew exactly what chaos was coming and welcomed it anyway. "I certainly hope so," he said. And despite every logical subroutine in my neural matrix screaming warnings, I found myself hoping for the same thing. The commendation arrived 3 weeks later, which should have been my first warning that the universe had developed a sadistic sense of humor. "Outstanding diplomatic innovation," the message read, transmitted directly from the Concordance High Council. Observers Vorith and Marcus Webb are hereby recognized for exceptional creative problem solving within established protocols. New assignment pending. Marcus read it over my shoulder and grinned like a predator who had just spotted wounded prey. "New assignment," he said. "That sounds promising." "That sounds terrifying," I corrected. The last time the High Council used the phrase, creative problem solving, an entire star system's economy collapsed because someone tried to introduce cryptocurrency to a feudal society. Did it work? Everyone involved was exiled to a penal colony on the galactic rim. Marcus shrugged, which was a uniquely human gesture that somehow conveyed both indifference and enthusiasm simultaneously. But did the cryptocurrency work? I did not dignify that with a response. The new assignment details arrived the following morning. I read them 3 times, certain there had been a translation error. There had not been. They are sending us to Caldros Prime, I said slowly. Marcus looked up from his breakfast, which appeared to be some sort of earth grain mixed with processed sugar and dehydrated fruit. Humans have absolutely bizarre dietary habits. Never heard of it. What is the situation? Civil war. 12 separate factions. 80-year conflict. Estimated casualties in the billions. 3 previous observer teams requested emergency extraction due to psychological trauma from witnessing the violence. Marcus took another bite of his sugar grain concoction. Sounds like Tuesday. Marcus, this is serious. Caldros Prime is considered the most dangerous observer posting in the Concordance. Species there have weaponized concepts we do not even have words for. They have turned philosophy into ammunition. Last year, one faction killed 17,000 enemies with a carefully constructed logical paradox. A paradox? They made the enemy soldiers think about it so hard their neural systems overloaded and shut down. For the first time since I had met him, Marcus looked genuinely impressed. That is actually kind of amazing. That is actually kind of horrifying. Little bit of both, maybe. We shipped out 4 days later on a Concordance transport that smelled vaguely of recycled air and existential dread. The journey took 2 weeks, during which Marcus spent most of his time researching Caldros Prime history and taking extensive notes on his personal terminal. I tried not to think about the fact that we were almost certainly going to die. Caldros Prime was a planet of contradictions. Beautiful crystalline cities that had been bombed into artistic rubble. Lush forests where trees had been genetically modified to scream when harvested. Oceans that changed color based on whoever currently controlled the coastline. The dominant species, the Caldrosians, were bipedal humanoids with silver skin and eyes that shifted through the entire light spectrum depending on their emotional state. They were brilliant, creative, passionate, and absolutely committed to destroying each other over philosophical differences so subtle that I needed advanced translation algorithms just to understand what they were arguing about. The 12 factions each believed they had the correct interpretation of their founding prophet's teachings. The problem was that the prophet, a being named Verith the Wise, had deliberately spoken in riddles and metaphors, apparently believing that truth should be earned through contemplation rather than handed out like ration packets. Personally, I thought Verith the Wise was Verith the incredibly unhelpful, but nobody asked my opinion. We set up our observation post in the neutral zone, a strip of territory between faction lines that everyone had agreed not to bomb until after they finished bombing everywhere else. Our quarters were a reinforced bunker that had previously housed a weapons depot. It still smelled like explosives and broken dreams. So, Marcus said, surveying the surveillance feeds showing 12 different armies preparing 12 different offensives, what is the over-under on us surviving the month? Statistically, 14% chance we make it to week 3. I have survived worse odds. When? College midterms. I was beginning to understand why humans had such a complicated relationship with mortality. For the first week, we followed standard protocol. We observed. We documented. We watched philosophical debates escalate into artillery strikes. I filed reports that nobody would read. Marcus made sarcastic comments about everything. Then, during week 2, something changed. We were monitoring a particularly heated exchange between the faction of eternal questioning and the disciples of absolute certainty. The argument had started over breakfast rations and had somehow evolved into a debate about the nature of existence itself. Weapons were being charged. Shields were activating. Marcus was watching with unusual intensity. They are not actually fighting about philosophy, he said suddenly. Of course they are. That is the entire foundation of the conflict. No, look closer. Watch their body language. Listen to what they are not saying. I enhanced the audio feed. Filtered through 17 layers of contextual analysis. And then I saw it. They were scared. All of them. Every faction. Terrified that if they stopped fighting, if they admitted they might be wrong, everything they had sacrificed for 80 years would become meaningless. The war had stopped being about truth decades ago. Now it was about justifying the cost. They want someone to give them an excuse to stop, Marcus said quietly. They just do not know how to ask for it. We cannot interfere. Marcus gave me that look again. The dangerous one. Define interfere. 3 days later, Marcus announced he was organizing a planet-wide academic symposium. Absolutely not, I said immediately. Why not? We are observers. Observers observe things. Academic conferences are things. Therefore, we can observe an academic conference. That logic is so flawed it actually hurts my cognitive processes. Is it though? The concordance encourages cultural understanding. What better way to understand a culture than to facilitate intellectual exchange? You are not facilitating anything. You are manipulating them into talking instead of shooting. Technically, I am just providing a venue. What they choose to do with that venue is entirely their decision. I should have stopped him. I should have filed an emergency report. I should have done literally anything except what I actually did, which was help him send invitations to all 12 faction leaders. The invitations were carefully worded. A neutral examination of Verith the Wise's teachings, facilitated by impartial observers, with no political agenda or desired outcome. Attendance optional. Weapons prohibited. Lunch provided. That last part was Marcus's idea. He claimed humans did their best thinking while eating. I suspected he just wanted to bankrupt our operational budget on catering. To my absolute shock, all 12 faction leaders accepted. They are going to kill each other in the conference room, I predicted. Probably, Marcus agreed. But at least they will be in the same room. That is progress. The symposium was held in an ancient library that had somehow survived 80 years of warfare, possibly because all 12 factions considered it sacred ground. Or possibly because it was so buried under bureaucratic protections that nobody could actually file the paperwork necessary to bomb it. The faction leaders arrived separately, each surrounded by guards, each radiating hostility through their spectrum-shifting eyes. Marcus greeted them at the door wearing what he called his diplomatic casual outfit, which appeared to be the same clothes he always wore but with fewer food stains. Gentlemen, ladies, and non-binary philosophical warriors, he began. Thank you for coming. Today we are going to do something radical. We are going to actually listen to each other. A faction leader named Korath, whose eyes were currently burning red with anger, stood up. We have been listening for 80 years. All we hear are lies and blasphemy. Have you though? Marcus asked. Have you really listened? Or have you just been waiting for your turn to talk? The room went silent. Marcus pulled up a holographic display of Verith the Wise's most controversial teaching. The truth is a river that flows in many directions simultaneously. To dam one course is to deny the nature of water. Obviously, said Myrax, leader of the disciples of absolute certainty, this means there is one true path that encompasses all others. Wrong, snapped Torvin of the faction of eternal questioning. It means there is no true path, only infinite exploration. You are both missing the point, Marcus interrupted. What if Verith was not talking about truth at all? What if he was talking about methods of seeking truth? Every eye in the room fixed on him. The spectrum shifted through colors I had never seen before. Explain, Korath demanded. You have spent 80 years fighting over what Verith meant. But maybe the meaning is not the point. Maybe the point is that you are supposed to keep questioning, keep seeking, keep arguing, but without killing each other over it. Maybe disagreement is not a bug in the system. Maybe it is the entire point of the system. I held my breath. This was either brilliant or suicidal. Possibly both. Myrax spoke slowly. You are suggesting that all 12 interpretations could be simultaneously valid? I am suggesting that maybe being right is less important than seeking truth together. You are all brilliant philosophers. Imagine what you could accomplish if you spent 80 years building on each other's ideas instead of destroying them. The room erupted. Not with violence, but with argument. Passionate, intense, academic argument. They were still disagreeing about everything, but now they were actually engaging with each other's points instead of just dismissing them. It went on for 6 hours. Marcus and I watched from the observation booth. "This is not going to end the war," I said. "No," Marcus agreed. "But it is going to change the conversation. And once the conversation changes, everything else follows." He was right, of course. Humans are annoyingly right about things they should not understand. Over the next month, the symposium became a regular event. Factions still fought, but now they also talked. Weapons fire decreased by 40%. Philosophical casualties dropped to nearly zero. Someone even published a joint paper examining Varitha's teachings from multiple perspectives simultaneously. It was messy. It was complicated. It was absolutely not a clean resolution. But it was better. The Concordance sent another commendation. And another assignment. They are never going to stop sending us to impossible situations, are they? I asked Marcus as we packed up our observation post. "Nope," he said cheerfully. "Turns out being good at your job means you get more job. This is a terrible reward system. Welcome to the universe, Vorith. It runs on irony and spite." I had been an observer for 37 cycles before meeting Marcus Webb. I had followed every protocol, filed every report, never once stepped beyond my designated role. Now I was apparently part of a two-being diplomatic intervention team that specialized in technically not interfering with situations while completely transforming them. The scary part was that I had stopped wanting to go back to my old job. "Next assignment is a trade dispute that has escalated into a religious war," I said, reading the briefing. Marcus grinned. "Outstanding. I have been wanting to try something with competitive cooking shows. That makes no sense whatsoever. Trust me." I should not have trusted him. Every logical subroutine in my neural matrix said trusting him was a terrible idea. But I did anyway. Because sometimes, when someone warns you not to interfere, the most human thing you can do is redefine what interference means. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe needs a little redefinition.